Hi, everyone. Welcome to tonight's panel. We are so excited to have you here today. We have a really great selection of panelists that you'll hear from, current students as well as an alumna, and is the director of FYSEP, so First-Year Student Enrichment Program. Jay Davis is here, and he'll explain a little bit about the program, and we'll get all of your questions answered hopefully today. There's a couple logistical things I want to go over before we get started. First, my name is Kate Featherston. I am an Assistant Director of Admissions here at Dartmouth. And before I hand the mic over to Jay, I just wanted to point out the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. That's where you'll ask any questions that come up during the panel. I'll be in there answering questions and forwarding them over to Jay and the panelists. So please use that if you have any questions that come up. You can also ask questions after the panel as well. The session's being recorded tonight, and hopefully we'll get that up on the website for admitted students sometime in the next few weeks. We also have subtitles available for tonight's panel, and you can access those at the bottom of your screen. And with that, I'd love to have Jay introduce himself and tonight's wonderful panel of students and alumni.
Thanks so much, and welcome everybody. It is really exciting to have you on with us. The one thing I don't like about the webinar format is I can't see you, but I can see some of our current students and alum, which is just delightful. My name is, as you see, is Jay Davis, and I have the pleasure of not only being a Dartmouth alum and having come to Dartmouth as a very low income student many years ago now, but also the biggest thing for me now is that I get to work with students like those on this screen and like those of you that I can't see, who I hope will be able to come here next year and be excited about it, who are first gen and who are low income as well. And that group of students is an incredibly important group of students to me, but most importantly to this college. And I think, as you will hear me say often, if you end up coming to Dartmouth, that Dartmouth is a better place because of the students that you see in front of you who are current students or recent alumni, and will be better if you come here. And so I just want to make sure that's very clear. And we are delighted that you've been accepted. Congratulations. It is not an easy thing to do. And we hope, of course, that you want to come. But even more than that, we want it to be the right place for you. And so our panelists are going to answer honestly, of course, and talk about, sort of what are some of the struggles of coming, one, to Dartmouth, or two, to any place in a pandemic, right? And these are different times. And I will show, this is gonna be like old school technology here, but I'm gonna like pull up some pictures from the last 2 hours. This is where, let's see if I can show it to you. Yeah, you can see that. This is a picnic that was on the green just a couple of, literally an hour ago. You can see masks and all those things. It's not quite normal for us, but these are all first gen and low income students who were able to eat from our local burrito place and just get to be together. And that community, such as it was, it had to be small. We couldn't have more than 25 people there because of COVID and all those pieces. But it's real. And I think that if anything has been shown to us by the pandemic, it's that we can't take community for granted, and also how important it is in our lives. And so this session is really about community. It happens to be a first gen and low income community, which is dear to so many of our hearts. But it's about community more broadly and about Dartmouth and how it fits for you and all that. So I want to focus to be on them though, because they are our current students or recent folks who just graduated, and they are all first gen and low income. They all did the first year student enrichment program. So I'm gonna have them introduce themselves in just a second, but I'm just gonna give you like the really quick version of what FYSEP is. And FGLI, most of you are familiar with, but first generation and low income. And what FYSEP is a smaller sort of, if you give it that there's rectangles and there's squares, right? And all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. I think that's right. I was an English major, but I think that's the right geometry. The rectangles in this case are all first gen and low income students. We will be supporting all first gen and low income students. I am excited about the various programs that we have to do that, funding sources to make your life as just possible as it can be for you to thrive. But we also have this FYSEP program, which is the square, which is something that all first gen students have an opportunity to do, which is to participate in what's now a 4-week long summer session. It's in August. We hope it will be in person this year. It was virtual exclusively last year for obvious reasons. Signals seem to be that we may be moving towards being able to have at least the residential piece in person, which would be amazing. The classes are harder because, of course, they're inside and getting a bunch of students. So that may be somewhat virtual, somewhat not. But for Yvonne and Mekara, who you can see, they didn't get to experience an in-person piece, and we're hoping that the 25s are able to. Regardless of whether it's in person or whether it's residential or whether it's virtual, what it does is three basic things. It tries to make your transition academically to Dartmouth as smooth as possible, right? We want you to be able to thrive academically here. Dartmouth is different than any high school, but it's particularly different than some of the under-resourced high schools that some of you go to. And we're just aware of that. And that's just a reality. And if you've gone to a high school that doesn't have a lab as a possibility for its science classes, you are coming in with a different background than a student who may have had 4 years of lab classes at a more resourced public school or at a private school. That doesn't mean you're not the right fit for Dartmouth, but it does mean that there may be some pieces that we can help kind of fill in. And we want you to be able to know what the resources at Dartmouth are, and really importantly, be more likely to use them, because there's plenty of things in my life that I know are good for me that I don't do. So I think knowing that there's the resources and then knowing how to use them and being more likely to use them, huge piece. And then we want you to be aware of the incredible community and network of support that you each are to each other, and to the upper class students that are your mentors, and to the faculty who care deeply about you. Some of them are first gen themselves, et cetera. So academic transition, taking advantage of the resources that Dartmouth has, and there are many. And then also knowing that you have this community that is there for you the whole way through. And then that community will be certainly fellow 25s, but it'll also be the 23s and 22s who will be able to be your mentors. It will be the 24s who are closest to you in age and are there to support you. And then it will also be people like Sabine, Jenny, who's not going to talk so much on this, but is dear to my heart because Jenny is a 14. You can see her with the wonderful background. She was a FYSEP mentor for us, first gen and low income herself. She's one of the leaders within the admissions community. She is an alumna of this college who lived that experience. And Sabine, who is just to my right on my screen at least, who just graduated last year, they are both representatives of a large network, an ever growing network of first gen and low income alumni and alumni of Dartmouth College who are FYSEP students themselves and who can bring that. And that is really a wonderful resource for you to have. We have a network of 70 first gen low income FYSEP alums who want to be contacted, who've given us their photos and their information to share, and we've got it collected into it, which I'm happy to share actually with any 25 who reaches out to me. Maybe Jenny or Kate, you could put my email address into the they can see the chat, right? Or you can get it to them. That network is a really important one because most of you are going to be first generation white collar workers, or potentially first generation to have a mortgage on a house, potentially. There's a lot of things about being post Dartmouth that we also want to be supporting students with. So that's enough of me talking. What I'm going to do is have our students and alumni introduce themselves, and then we have some questions for them. And then we, of course, want to leave time for you to ask your questions as well. So I will go from maybe our most recent arrivals. So maybe we'll start with Mekara, who I got to just have a burrito with a few minutes ago. So maybe for each of you, you could just obviously tell us where you're from and what your class year is, and maybe something of academic interest to you, and something outside of academics at Dartmouth that you're excited about or hope to be excited about, because for the first years, it's a little bit been a different experience. So Mekara.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Mekara. I'm a freshman from Cambodia. As of right now, I'm planning to major in gender as well as government, primarily international development or relations. I am a part of, past COVID, I hope to be more involved with outside activities, especially the DOC, the Dartmouth outdoor community and all that. And currently I'm involved with GIS, which is the Great Issues Scholars community on campus, where we often got to meet with experts and discuss international issues.
Thank you, Mekara. And Yvonne.
Hi everyone, I'm Yvonne. I'm a 24, pronouns he, him, his. Right now I'm in Hanover, Dartmouth College, Abenaki land. Originally from Arapaho Territory in Denver, Colorado. I'm an earth science major, environmental earth science major with the minor in global health. I'm a global health fellow. And on campus, I'm really interested in agricultural work, so I do a lot of work at the farm. Fun time.
Awesome. Thank you, Yvonne. And Emmanuel.
Hi everyone, my name is Emmanuel Briesa. I am a senior or 21 from Las Vegas studying government in English. Throughout Dartmouth, I've really been involved with the Rockefeller Center for Public Policy, and I founded two clubs, the Dartmouth Minority Pre-Law Association and the Dartmouth Latinx Public Service Society. And then after Dartmouth, I'm going to Harvard Law School. So if you have any questions about, sort of the professional aspects of this school as well, feel free to put those in the chat as well.
Wonderful. Thank you, Emmanuel. And this is, we don't like talking about Harvard undergraduate, but we're delighted to talk about graduate programs like law school. So we're all for that. And let's go to Ms. Sabine.
Hey y'all, I'm Sabine, I'm a 20, and so I just graduated last year. I studied political science or government with a minor in African and African-American studies. Something that I was interested in academically was Black political theory and understanding how Black and Brown communities interact with governing institutions. Something outside of class that I was interested in was spoken word poetry. So, yeah.
And I remember her during her, we called it Coffee House, which is a sort of like a talent show, but we didn't want it to be intimidating, so we called it a Coffee House. And Sabine, as a first year who hadn't actually matriculated yet, right? It was a week before starting, and she did a spoken word poem about police violence and what it means to be sitting in a car, and it resonates so profoundly for me these days, Sabine, still, sadly. But it was an amazing performance that you gave, and it affected a lot of people. And that was 5 years ago, as crazy as that is. So I am, let me just quickly answer a couple of questions that are important and that I should have hit in my intro, and then we'll have some questions for our panelists. But just how do you become a member of FYSEP is a question that a couple of people asked, which is a very important one. So if you are first generation, which Dartmouth defines as having neither of your parents attended and graduated from a 4-year university or college, and that is a very broad definition. It's the broadest that I know, which is great. If you aren't sure and Dartmouth doesn't have you as first gen, but you think that you are first gen, for example, your parents graduated from college in Honduras, and you are really, really concerned about the dramatic difference between that sort of cultural background and this cultural background, we certainly work with students to make sure that the first gen is honored in spirit as well as the letter of it. And if your expected family contribution is $10,000 or less, and many of our students, it's zero, but up to $10,000, that's our definition of first generation and low income, right? The FGLI piece. You will receive a letter from us in mid to the third week of May that will invite you to apply to the program. I will tell you a secret, which is that the application is not particularly stringent. If you are able to just let us know that you're excited to come, we want to have you. So don't worry about the application so much as just getting it in, which shows us that you have enough interest to at least fill it out, right? So that anybody who is first gen and low income will be invited, and then some number of you will say, yes, you want to be here. The wise ones of you will say yes, but then the ones who can't come for whatever reason, right? And believe me, I understand in some cases mothers and fathers or elder brothers who are taking care of you who don't even like the idea of sending you away the second week of September. The idea of sending you away the first week of August is a harder sell, and I get that. So we hope that you will think about doing the program and that you're able to. If you don't, we will also still support you and make sure that this place is a place where you can thrive. So let's go to just why you picked Dartmouth and what you most love about it. And maybe I'll go the reverse order with this. And so these will be sort of quick answers. Okay, so just why you picked Dartmouth, either 5 years ago or a year ago, and what do you most love about it? And I know superlatives can be a bit intimidating, so it doesn't be anything you most love, but just something you love about it. Okay, Sabine.
Okay, something that I loved about Dartmouth. There's so many things, right? The biggest one for me is probably just how passionate so many people are about so many different things. I always enjoyed getting the chance to hear about what someone was doing, or going to like a live art installation for my friend's presentation, or going to different thesis presentations, and just learning like right off the bat just how many issues and things that are out there that people were interested in. So it just made me really passionate to like be passionate about like my own things and then share like what I was interested in. And everyone was just like supporting each other, especially in FYSEP. And we were all always just like highlighting like our small wins and things that we were passionate about. So I'd say, yeah, just the fact that everyone comes there really passionate about just learning or about something in particular, which I just enjoyed. Yeah.
Thanks, Sabine. What about for you, Emmanuel?
Yeah, so I think I most love just the autonomy that we have as students to like really make the Dartmouth experience your own. With like the D plan and stuff, you could really do like your study abroads, your off terms, your internships, the liberal arts curriculum. I fully took advantage of like dabbling in different departments in like very low stakes setting. So I think just being able to like pursue my intellectual interests in as deep as I possibly want them, as I want to, the opportunity has always been there, and I absolutely love that.
Thank you. How about Yvonne? When you think about why did you come to Dartmouth, and then something that you have particularly enjoyed so far?
So Dartmouth was in the middle of the woods, and I really like nature. So it was a pretty good sell, pretty good fit. Lots of hikes, and again, they have like an organic farm that I love working at. So it's always nice to just plant something and get your hands dirty. But yeah, I think what I've been most impressed by is like everyone wants to improve here, and it's something that's really touching. Like there's some people who are like, oh, you know, I'm at the top, I don't need to do anything more, but not at Dartmouth. At Dartmouth, like everyone understands their weaknesses and they try to address them, and it's really heartwarming to see people wanting to go beyond their like personal borders and kind of break free from that. So
Well said. Thanks, Yvonne. And Mekara.
There are so many reasons why I picked Dartmouth, but one of the main reasons, hands down, probably have to be community. I love how supportive the community is, and that's why I don't regret coming here at all. And what I've been enjoying so far is just meeting my classmates outside of class. I don't have any in-person class right now, but whenever we meet each other, it feels like we know each other already. And that's been probably my highlight of the week, every week. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And thinking about challenges, right? And there's many of them for anybody going off to college. And I think also a wise phrase that I heard once long ago was that all change is loss, right? It can be the best possible thing in the world that you're changing to do and wonderful, but it's still a loss of what you had and what you're used to and rituals and traditions and all that. So I think challenges is a very, very natural part of going off to college. And what was a particular challenge for you all when you think about coming in as a first-year student? And then maybe what's something that you learned, if you have yet, and that's okay if you haven't, that helped you to meet this challenge, right? So what was the challenge? And then something that you've learned to help meet it. And so does one of you want to start? Thanks, Yvonne.
of course, I'd love to kick things off. One challenge that I found, especially during COVID, was kind of building community. It's really difficult. Like Makra said, a lot of the classes aren't in person, which makes it hard to connect with the students, or you just feel disconnected from like this predominantly white institution at times. And you struggle with that. But I think Jay and the FYSEP crew as a whole has like really helped me in making connections and meeting new people, and just going out and understanding that like you're not alone is the most important thing, and reaching out for help is a huge factor in what helped me overcome my own insecurities at Dartmouth.
And just a quick note, because I know for all of you participants that are out there and you can't be seen and you may be trying to get something to eat, or you may be on Instagram at the same time, I hope that as you're listening that you remember to write things down that you hear that are things you want to remember, because I don't want you just to end this and go, yeah, I kind of feel better about Dartmouth. I mean, that's great. And I hope that happens. But I also want you to have really tangible take homes, things that you want to make sure, because there is some wisdom on this screen, right? People that have done something that you haven't done yet, which is they've gone to college and in some cases graduated. So do just make sure to keep notes, because there's some good stuff being dispensed here. What about, let's go to the other end of the age spectrum in our panel. Sabine.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, I'd say for me, the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest ones coming into Dartmouth, was the financial one. And I know that that's something that a lot of FYSEP members can relate to. And so, yeah, coming into college, I was filed as an independent, and I didn't have parents or that kind of support coming into college. And so it was a little tough, honestly, I'm not gonna lie, but something that I am forever grateful for was just how many resources there were to help me through Dartmouth, not just with the financial contribution, but sophomore year, I had to get 2 of my teeth pulled, and the Dartmouth insurance, unfortunately, still doesn't cover that. And so I had to find dental, and Jay and FYSEP was extremely helpful and helped me to find that. And then I wanted to start counseling, and I had to have a copay, but the counseling center had a fund, which is a thing that they don't necessarily advertise, but it's a thing where if you need help paying the copay, they will pay for it. And I'm extremely grateful for that, because that was just another thing that would have added more stress to being a student. And instead, there were ways for me to find different funding sources, and it was all through FYSEP. So I really appreciated that. But yeah, the biggest challenge was definitely the financial one, and navigating how to get a job, how to pay for certain things that weren't paid for on the tuition and stuff like that.
Thanks, Sabine. As always, your honesty is so appreciated. Mekara.
My biggest challenge is the academics, primarily when it comes to reading and writings. And to overcome that, I've been taking advantage of the office hour, talking to the dean, as well as taking advantage of the student academic center, as well as the writing center. And I can't stress this enough. Without FYSEP, I don't think I will be able to take advantage of those resources. And I'm grateful to be able to know those resources before coming to Dartmouth, and know that someone is always there to help you navigating through that academic challenges.
Thanks, Mekara. Yeah, and she says, reading and writing in little details, it is their second language or third language. So, it's incredible. And I know for many of you that are participants on this call, English may not have been your first language. And so huge props. And also know that the resources to support with free writing, with tutoring and all those pieces that are there can be a big help. What about for you, Emmanuel?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest adjustment was just culture shock. I'm from Las Vegas, and I grew up there. And so I think moving all the way to Hanover, New Hampshire, and more New Englandy, I think was very shocking for me. And I think I was able to overcome it by just finding a few select people, from Vegas or from California, where I feel is more similar, and just kind of going through this new experience together, and then really bonding over that. But then also just embracing the whole experience for what it was, and taking all the best parts from it, and reconciling the parts that maybe I didn't like so much. But yeah, I think the culture shock was ridiculous, but I think after some time it grows on you.
And maybe a good segue then would be, and I see a question in the box, which is, is the amount of wealth you're surrounded by overwhelming? And do you ever feel disabled by your family's income bracket and what that means? And I think that is a good question to keep in mind as we look at the next question I have for a couple of our panelists, which is, given that Dartmouth is still predominantly wealthy and white, though I will say that is changing. And the 25s, you have the potential to be dramatically the largest group of first and low-income students that Dartmouth has ever accepted. Dartmouth is around 14% right now for first and low income, and your class is many percentage points higher than that, potentially, right? Depending on who says yes. But Dartmouth has never offered anywhere close to as many positions or places here to first and low income as they have this year. So that will change the where we're going, and that's really exciting. But it's still predominantly white, and it's certainly predominantly wealthy, right? People say, well, half the students are on financial aid. Well, that also means half of the students aren't, and that half the students' families are writing, $80,000 in checks every year without financial aid. And that's a lot of wealth. And so given that it is predominantly wealthy and white still, why would you recommend it to FGLI students? And I let folks sort of sign up ahead of time for ones. And so how about Sabine and Emmanuel? Why don't you answer these? I don't care. Maybe Emmanuel, want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, um, well, I think funny enough, I think that's one of the unique things about Dartmouth in that I personally didn't feel like the wealth disparities all too much, only because first of all, like we're in Hanover, so there's not a lot of places for you to sort of like demonstrate your wealth. Like for example, if you go to school in the city, like there's clubs, there's bars, there's restaurants, there's many ways to sort of like show off what, well, not show off, but sort of just like live a different lifestyle. Whereas here in Hanover, like we all go to like the same dining halls, we all go to the same gyms. The social scene is like, in dorms and clubs and Greek houses and, college centers. So I think I wasn't super attuned to the wealth disparities. I think that aspect just really came across in like conversation, just like little things here and there, or like maybe the clothes that people wore. But I personally didn't care about that too much because my priority has always just been like the academics and the education itself. And then furthermore, I would still recommend this school to first-gen low-income students because I think by the time you graduate from Dartmouth, like you'll have your own degree, your own Ivy League degree. And I think that that gives you some sort of equalizer that maybe wasn't there beforehand. And I think that's something really worth pursuing. And also keeping in mind that the people that graduate from the school are people who end up going into, these very senior positions in life in all sorts of fields. And so I think having had the experience of being with this demographic that you might interact with in the future, I think there's only a benefit to that.
Thank you. And Sabine, what about your perspective?
Yeah, I'd say for me, yeah, in addition to what you're saying about the benefits, I say a good benefit, I mean, one benefit that I can think of was the perspectives that I heard from others who came from different spaces. When I got to Dartmouth, it was very clear that I came from a different place. I'm from Newark, New Jersey, and it was a very different experience with the education system there than what I was seeing in my classroom, especially being a government major, and some of the time being the only Black person, sometimes the only Black woman, like in spaces. I'd say that it was helpful to have different perspectives challenge like what I thought to be true about like the world, about things that need to happen. I can still remember having really like engaging conversations and debates in some classes around education policy in New York, and having that be challenged in a way that wouldn't have otherwise have happened, and learning from one another through our like own experiences. And that took a while for me to understand that as a benefit. Instead, I was like, no, like people have different like thoughts, and like this is just like, no one understands like what needs to happen in the world, when really it's like, no, like we're all here coming from different spaces and we all have an opportunity to learn from one another, not just like from an academic perspective, but also on a more personal perspective about our own values and beliefs. And so that's one reason why I'd say it's a benefit to have just a wide range of socioeconomic statuses in one space.
And I'll add one quick thing here, which may also go with the second question here. We will get to all the questions, but some of them sort of depending on the theme. This one, and thank you, Armita, is, do you think that students and professors are cognizant of the position that low income and first gen students are in? And I think the answer to that, of course, ultimately is it depends. I think some are exceptionally aware of it. Some are first gen and low income themselves, and others are not very aware of it at all. And they will in class say something like, 8% of the US population lives under the poverty line. And for those people that are not aware that 7 of the students in their class are in the exact same piece, right? And so I think what I will say to that is that, one, yes, you will encounter that at any college you go to, people that are not very aware of it, and some that are very tuned in. I think one thing we've really worked on at Dartmouth in the last few years, though, is this exact question. And we've worked hard with a group that I co-chair called Money Matters. And just the quick version is that it's a bunch of people, deans and counselors and professors and administrators, financial aid, that meet together to talk specifically about the experience of low-income students at Dartmouth, whether first gen or not, and how do we help to make that as less of a barrier as possible. And one thing we did, and Sabine is actually featured in this video, is we made a video years ago that is a short video. It's a wonderful video, 9 minutes long, about the academic experience specifically of low-income students. And we then used that video, and I used that video with a colleague to bring it to important committee chair meetings, all the department chairs in a room listening and watching this video, to talk to them about why it's important to, like, so as an example, 5 years ago, the math department some of the professors were assigning textbooks that cost $400. The financial aid allotment for textbooks is $1,100 a year, which is about $110 a class. So a $400 textbook, that doesn't work. Having seen this video, the math department chair decided, okay, I'm going to start by having all math professors need to know how much their book costs. Now that kind of seems like a no-brainer, but it wasn't happening for all. And let me tell you, when a professor knows the book costs $400, that's a very different thing to assign it. And then that same department chair 2 years later said, you can't have a textbook that costs more than $75 in the math department. That's significant change. And that's coming directly from seeing the video, from hearing Sabine and other professors talk about their experiences. So I'd say we're moving in the right direction, but I would not pretend that you will certainly still encounter professors and students that don't understand, or a professor in a class that might ask first day after spring break, where did you all go for vacation? Which immediately shows differences in background, right? But we're working on it. And Dartmouth is a very, very different place, even than 5 years ago that way, which is encouraging. Let's look at FYSEP specifically, and sort of let's look at your experience. I'm going to go to the 24s on our call, which is Mekara and Yvonne. What was your experience of FYSEP like, and how did it help you? Maybe Mekara, you want to start with that?
Sure. For me, I love getting to know people, obviously through virtually this year, but it was really nice to know people before coming to Dartmouth, and that kind of helped me feel like, I do belong here because I already know a group of community. And also, I think what's great about FYSEP is that they introduce me to resources on campus, but also get a sense of how the academics work, because we were assigned into three classes, and we get like a taste of what college feels like. So in a sense, FYSEP really prepared me for that, for the challenge of being at Dartmouth.
Thanks, Mekara. Yvonne, what about for you? This is about 9 months ago.
FYSEP, I remember during the time I was also working, but FYSEP always provided like a reset space to be open and honest about my own struggles and like the feelings that I had about going to Dartmouth. We were very supportive of each other, and I think if I didn't go through FYSEP, I wouldn't have found the friends that I have found now. I remember during the FYSEP program, we have residential floors. I was part of the blue floor. And some of my like best friends still are from the blue floor in FYSEP. So like those early connections really develop into strong friendships that, you're not gonna let go of anytime soon. So.
And thank you, Yvonne. And I think that's absolutely right. And I could see that even on the green today with people and their connections with each other. I think this is an important enough question. And maybe briefly for Sabine and Emmanuel, if you want to also just, why was FYSEP either the pre-orientation program or just the community? Why was that important to your navigating of Dartmouth? And I know, Sabine, you actually recorded a little video for the 25s as part of the Dimensions website. So maybe do you want to just give us a quick synopsis of that?
Yeah, of course. I was just saying something that I always heard in FYSEP about, like it's not that you're lucky to be like in Dartmouth, it's that like Dartmouth is lucky to have you and like your own perspective. And so that just goes into like, FYSEP was really important in like making that community for me and supporting me to like become someone that like I believed in myself, And so, yeah, FYSEP is near and dear to my heart. So that's what the video was about.
And what about for you, Emmanuel?
Yeah, I think for me, so during pre-orientation week or before classes start, essentially is when FYSEP occurs. And I think what was really helpful for me is just getting like a glimpse of what was to come, sort of like easing yourself into like a cold and deep pool before like getting into the cold. Instead of just jumping in, you kind of like, dip your toes and go. And one particular thing that like really helped me was, and like we took like this, it wasn't a fake class, but like we got the sense of like what a class would look like, what exams would look like, how talking to professors, like the norms and protocols and things of that sort that you just don't have any idea exist. So I think just learning like the more nuances of like how things sort of will operate and what's about to await you, I think was extremely helpful in preparing me well to like, hit the ground running week one of classes versus, stumbling my way through.
Yeah, thank you. What about something you wish you'd known as an incoming first year, which these 25s are going to be, whether you come to Dartmouth or you go to someplace else, in a couple months, you're going to be heading off. And all four of these panelists have accumulated wisdom, right? And they've all heard me say that, you know, one of my favorite sayings is that good choices comes from wisdom, and wisdom comes from bad choices, right? Good choices come from wisdom, and wisdom comes from bad choices. Or the other one, that experience is what you get when you don't get what you want, right? And so I think there's, how can we learn from that? And so what do you wish you had known when you were an incoming first year, right? So maybe Sabine, you want to think about that? Answer that one for us.
Yeah, so many things to know, right? The one that I'm thinking about is that it's okay to ask for help. Coming into Dartmouth, and you know, feeling like I was a higher achieving like student from my school. I came in like, no, I need to figure all the things out. And like, for the most part, I had to figure things out beforehand, like even during the application process. And so it happened earlier on my time at Dartmouth where I was like, ooh, I need help, where I just wasn't doing well in classes. And I ended up taking a speed reading course in order to catch up, because I apparently didn't read quicker enough. But it got to the point where like I needed to ask for help instead of like asking earlier. So that's just one thing that from lessons we learned, that, you know, help is great. Everyone's here to support you. But yeah, that's the one thing I wish I'd known.
Thank you. What about for you, Mekara?
Something I wish I had known when I was an incoming first year is probably just know that everyone struggles. I think it's very easy when you go out and you see people hanging out or going on trips and doing these fun things. And sometimes we don't often get to be very real with each other. Like we'll just ask, hey, how you doing? And people are like, oh, good. That's it. So having that feeling, knowing that you're not alone going through your challenges, kind of, in a sense, reaffirm that we're all in this together. And I think that sometimes it's really hard. It can be easy to forget that.
Thanks, Mekara. And Emmanuel, you'd also signed up for this one as you head off, I think, to teach in Teach for America, and then off to law school after that. Think back to when you were an incoming first year. What do you wish you'd known?
I wish I had known that like fear is okay and like being absolutely terrified is okay. I think, you know, when you grow up like in a low income household, at least for me, like I had to be sort of fearless in the face of adversity and, you know, press forward and move on. And I think when I was coming to Dartmouth, I was just like, I wasn't scared until it was all happening, right? Like in the moment, like right before you're about to like jump off the cliff, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm really about to do this. And I was like absolutely terrified. And I felt bad about being fearful. I was like, this shouldn't be happening. Like I've been faced more intense situations before. Why am I so afraid? Etc. So I think if I were to just have recognized that like fear is okay, I think that would have been wonderful, because I think when you don't acknowledge things, it controls you in a sort of way. So like the fear really controlled me in like ways that I didn't like fully recognize. So I think just like understanding that fear is okay, and that, as Sabine said, accepting help and asking for help substantially. So I think just those two things.
Yeah, those are really important things. One of the questions that we had was, you know, someone who lives far away in California, and I get to Greek life next. Do you regret leaving as early as August? So we got two folks on here, Emmanuel, who is from Las Vegas, who came for the 1 week program, was what it was. And then we have Mekara and Yvonne, who live far away, Cambodia and Colorado, but didn't come early because it was virtual. And then Sabine, you were in Jersey, I believe, when you decided to come. But any thoughts on, really, so the question is, you know, is it worth coming early for FYSEP? You know, if you already are leaving home and families that depend on you, et cetera, what do you think about leaving to come early? Is it worth that? Any of you who want to respond to that?
I could kick us off. I think if you put it into perspective that you're going to be gone for the majority of the next 4 years, you kind of come to realize that like 1 month is only a plus, because you'll get to campus and like get acclimated with, you know, things in yourself before like the academics start and before like social things get a little more complicated as more people start coming. So I think, you know, just giving yourself the time to like ease in, I think is worth the time. And also it's very warm, so you take advantage of other stuff on campus, like the river's still warm and things of that sort.
And I realized for Mecca and Iman, it's kind of a hard question because you were home, and so it may be, I think that may be a bit different. What about for you, Sabine, and that idea? Like if it was, let's say it was 3 weeks longer than it was for you, and it was now the full 4 weeks we have, would you come to FYSEP?
Yeah, I agree completely with what you were just saying to Emmanuel. I feel like it is very helpful. I remember like getting lost when I was headed to my first class during FYSEP, but it was great because then a week later when we had classes, we were good to go. Like we were like, okay, like we know where things are at. Like we are more comfortable with the campus. And I was able to just get grounding before things got hectic and everyone was there. So yeah, I'd say it was a huge plus to be able to get acclimated. Yeah.
Awesome. And it sounds like there's interest already, maybe from that person about leaving California to come early, which is great. So for FYSEP, which is First-Year Student Enrichment Program, FYSEP, as I mentioned earlier, we will be writing out to the folks. And so you will all, if you are an estimated family contribution of less than $10,000 at our first gen, you will receive an invitation, and we will look forward to that. And that will be by about the 3rd week of May. So if you have not heard something by late May, you can reach out directly to me if you're curious and are not sure why it didn't happen. So do for sure pay attention to that. And then for the Greek life scene, I know that Sabine and Emmanuel were both in different Greek life organizations. Maybe if you want to speak to that, the question was, is it a predominantly white, wealthy culture? Is it an inclusive culture? It's certainly a lot of students are members of them. I think, Sabine, that you depledged from yours. Do you want to speak a bit to that decision or to what your experience was?
I'm sure, yeah. I'd say it's a matter of perspective, and it's also a matter of like where you're coming from, like what's considered predominantly white. I went to an all Black and Latinx high school and grew up in an all Black community all of my life. And so for me, it was a predominantly white space. Yeah, I enjoyed the friends that I made in my sorority. Ultimately just wasn't like a space that I felt like aligned with my values, but like I'm still really close friends with those that I made friends with in the sorority. So yeah, I'd say it just was extremely like not what I was looking for in terms of community, which is okay. It was a learning experience. And I'm grateful that I had the chance to at least check it out to see like what it was like for a little bit.
Emmanuel, what's your perspective and experience been?
Yeah, so I also joined a Greek life. I think for me, it was just something like I sort of stumbled upon. I didn't necessarily like care too much about it. But as rush events open, basically like I think it's like spring term of your first year, a lot of Greek houses just have like open lawn, like barbecues or like chats and stuff. So I think at least in my case, it was like very low stakes to kind of just like walk up and like sit down and like chit chat with like some of the people there. And if you vibed, then like you stuck around. And if you didn't, then you just move on. And I think I ended up deciding to join Greek life, not because I necessarily like saw after it, but because my close friends who were my close friends prior to rushing, like they were going to join. So I think just having people that I knew were going to go through this process alongside me, I think was really helpful. But I also don't think that it's not essential to like my Dartmouth experience like whatsoever. Like maybe I'll go every now and then, like maybe I'll like have meals and stuff with like some of the brothers in my frat, but I don't think it's been like super central to my experience whatsoever. So if you don't want to rush at all, I think that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, thank you both. What about balancing family situations with your life at college, right? I think that's a challenge for any student. But I think it can, particularly for first gen and low income students, have pieces involved with it of there's often guilt, right? About not being there to take care of family and younger siblings, to be able to contribute financially. Sometimes there may be financial precarity at home, which causes this extra piece. I had a student once, wonderful student who was homeless before he came to Dartmouth. And he talked about how the pieces at home, he said it was like trying to sing a song while there was a loud note that was off key that was playing all the time in the background. And you're trying to sing this beautiful thing, but you've got that note. And that I think is a pretty powerful way of thinking about it. Yvonne, I know you had something to offer on this. What's your perspective on that? Or experience that you've had with balancing family situations with life at college?
Mm-hmm. For sure. So unfortunately, my parents don't have legal residence in the States. So I've always had to like take up that responsibility ever since we came to the United States and be kind of an adult in their lives and take care of my little brother, pay bills, and like travel back and forth from Mexico to America in order to settle a lot of disputes. So when I left, I felt really bad because I wasn't going to be there for my younger brother. I wasn't going to be there for my parents to translate. A lot of the money that I made, just I had no idea what I was going to do. But going through FYSEP and hearing everyone else's experience kind of made me understand that there's a shared commonality in all of us, and family is very important to a lot of the students here. And we work together to kind of make sure that everyone has what they need. And thankfully, I'm like able to send money to my family, and like I text my brother constantly, FaceTime him when I can, and just find a way to balance my family and academics to make the most of my time and still feel connected to Dartmouth as a whole.
Thanks, Ivan. What about for you, Emmanuel?
Yeah, so I think likewise, I had a very difficult transition balancing like stuff with my family. So while I got to Dartmouth, my family was living like in a 1-bedroom apartment where like I couldn't even send my mail because people would steal it. And then meanwhile, I was like here on campus for the first time with like my own bedroom, meal swipes, like just a lot of stability and security that I've never felt before. Meanwhile, my family is experiencing all these same insecurities. And so I think what helped me sort of get through that is I think I was really in communication with my professors, like very consistently and constantly of like, for example, if I needed to, have my time spent elsewhere with my family and like it was midterm season, I would communicate with as much time as possible. Like, hey, I might need a day or two extension. And I think this sort of goes with what Sabine was saying, like asking for help and reaching out and letting know context instead of like forcing myself through an exam where I know I could perform better if I just have a little more time. So I think from an academic standpoint, I think that's what I was able to do. And then also just taking advantage of like the opportunities on campus to earn income and send money back home as well. So like, for example, I was a student manager at the Kala Center, which is like the main student center on campus. And they paid like $13 an hour for the night shift, which like no one, like I didn't do anything, right? I just like sat there and like made sure nothing was like burning, but like I would just study for classes, right? So like do that, or like the office of accessibility. I think it's like if you're a note taker for a class, then they'll pay you. So if I'm taking classes and I'm taking notes anyways, might as well just send a PDF and get paid for it. So I think Dartmouth has a lot of unique ways to get money that way that like I was able to send back home. But then also I was just really motivated. I don't know, for me at least, it motivated me to like take even more advantage of everything that Dartmouth had to offer. Like if there was free trips or if there was like opportunities for funding, like I made sure to apply to everything. And I think FYSEP is really good at like funneling those experiences through emails and newsletters. And then the last thing, which I don't know how important it may or may not be, but at least for me, like going through recruiting at Dartmouth, like Dartmouth is very highly sought after by employers. And so during my sophomore summer, there was a lot of recruiters to come from like a lot of different places. And I think getting an internship like on Wall Street and like getting all that money from one summer, I think made a world of a difference. And I think my peers and clubs at Dartmouth really helped set me up well to get, an opportunity like that. So yeah.
Awesome. That's a lot, Emmanuel. Thank you very much. And I think that there's some of the important conversations I've had have actually been and it was a couple of mothers recently with one student who just decided she didn't want to become a doctor, and that wasn't where her passion was. And what she really wanted to do was work with immigrant populations in the Middle East and to work with Doctors Without Borders. And she's a brilliant student. I mean, brilliant, wonderful, wonderful student. But for her mother particularly, she just couldn't imagine her daughter not becoming a doctor. That's what she knew and what she expected. And so the student asked if I could speak with her mother. And so I did with both of them on the call. We had this just 3-way call to just talk about, and I won't get into the details of it, but it was helpful. And I think there's times where we can sort of help families also just to understand, because by definition, if you're first gen, it's not been in the groundwater at home, right? It's not sort of there, just what college is and what does it mean. And people don't know what office hours are. Is that the time that residents are free, or is that when they're working? And how all of these things that we as an institution can sort of assume students know. That's exactly what FYSEP is trying to avoid, is to try to help demystify that and to try to make these assumptions not be assumptions. And so that's important. And I didn't mention the upper class mentor, but that's a really, really important role with our program, is the juniors and seniors that volunteer to spend time both during the summer session, but then more importantly, actually during the year, to be that older sibling, right, who is there, who can sort of help you with the behind the scenes stuff. And no, don't take Econ 1 from that professor, but if you can take it from this professor, here's where that free thing that Emmanuel was talking about, where you can get this. Here's one quick example. Free lunch at the best restaurant in the town with a professor once a term, your entire time at Dartmouth. It's take a professor to lunch. You are 3 times more likely to do that if you are a FYSEP student than if you are not. Think about that. And then you'll say, well, that's just free lunch. Why is that? That's not that important. Let's talk about important things. I have the jobs I have now, directing programs to support first-gen students, and before that, directing programs to help people become teachers, teacher education, because of connections I made with 2 professors at Dartmouth, period. That, yeah, my learning was important, but it was coming to know them outside of class, coming to talk to them, to know them as people, taking them to lunch, and then making these connections that then later on I get a phone call saying, hey, we're thinking about starting this program. We want to help first generation students. You have the background to do blah, blah, blah. And here we are. And so that's important. And the fact that a normal Dartmouth student, a non-first gen, just meaning non-first gen, is 1/3 as likely to take a professor to lunch as our FYSEP students are, that's a good sign, right? That's a good thing. So here's a question. How's the overall atmosphere, from Holly, thank you, among students at Dartmouth? Please don't say cutthroat. Well, I'm going to take that out and say you can't say cutthroat if that's been your experience. But obviously she's concerned about that piece. And what would you say? How was the atmosphere that way? And I will say for our 24s, it's a little different because their classes have been almost exclusively virtual. And so that's just a different experience. But any of you who want to jump in on this? Not as cutthroat as Harvard Law School, I can tell you that. But who wants to jump in?
Yeah, I guess I don't mind starting. I don't think it's cutthroat at all, like at all. I think even some of like the harder classes, like for example, I'd never taken a computer science class, and there's like a hard grading curve and it's a large class, but I think just the person to my right, the person to my left, don't know them, like they'll help you out. Like professors, students, like study guides. I don't think it's cutthroat whatsoever, even in the hardest classes with the toughest grading curves. People are just very open to helping you out.
Any other thoughts on that?
I think something about being like in the middle of nowhere in a small campus makes you really connect with other students. So I definitely wouldn't say that Dartmouth is competitive as much as it is supportive. Like everyone wants to see each other succeed. So that's been my experience.
I'm going to answer this question in a weird way. I'm going to say public policy 5 is really cutthroat. And the reason I'm going to say that is that I hear about that every year because it's a class that you have to take to be a first-year fellow, your first-year summer in DC if you want to do that. And so students are taking it completely trying to outcompete with each other to impress the professor. I bring that up because that is such an anomaly. And I hear students talk about that, and I was racking my brain, and I don't think I've heard that in any other class. And so it's interesting. So be aware of that with public policy 5. But I think that the student perspective is certainly what I've seen over the years with that too. Are there other questions? I'm aware of time and that we're sort of hitting that 1 hour mark in a second. So is there anything else that you didn't hear answered? And thank you to all of you who are there. Again, I wish I could see you, but we really want to be able to record this so that we could share it with others who can't be here, or if you want to listen to it later or have, translate it for a parent, et cetera. Any other questions that come to mind? And as we wait, I do want to thank our panelists so much, Sabine and Yvonne and Mekara and Emmanuel, for making this time and for being resources that you are, and also just amazing humans. But any other questions from folks? Daisy says, when you leave for the FYSEP program early, do you stay in the same dorms as you would if you got there early? That's a great question. And I assume you mean as if you were just going as a normal student. So the timing on this, let's just say ballpark dates. First day of classes is around the 16th. Pre-orientation, the first year student week is going to start around the 9th, let's say. FYSEP will start around August 6th. And so you will move into a dorm, which will almost certainly not be the dorm that you move into your first year fall, just because there's still Dartmouth students taking classes in the summer and there's only certain dorms available. So if you were to come, and we are in person, you would come, you would all live together in one dorm, safely, of course. We're hopeful that most folks are going to be vaccinated by then, which will change everything. But and then you will move into first year dorms that are reserved on campus for the fall. Thanks for that question. Another one, I'm not sure if this applies to anyone, but what advice would you give undocumented students, or are there resources I can reach out to that you may know of? So important. And I want to brag a little bit on Dartmouth for a second and say that Dartmouth is one of 7, I believe, colleges in the country where everything will be paid for you if you're undocumented, and you will not, of course, you can't use federal and state loans, but Dartmouth will make sure that your experience is no different financially. They also have a wonderful organization we do called Co-Fired, which is for undocumented students, for allies, for people who are just interested in the cause. And Co-Fired, a student organization with some help from some lawyers, successfully petitioned the Library of Congress to eliminate the use of illegal alien as one of the search words. That is dramatic, because there are thousands of libraries around the world, frankly, that use the Library of Congress's system. And so that's just an example of how active folks are on campus who are interested in helping to support undocumented students and their families, because we also have documented students who have undocumented families, as you've heard. And so that's an important piece. I don't know if anyone wants to offer anything about the undocumented experience and resources. There's a whole webpage that's purely focused on undocumented students and providing support. But anybody else want to throw anything in? I think for time I might move on, but I'm again happy, and because it is still a somewhat sensitive topic, I understand that, less so now than with our previous country's president, that I am happy to talk to anybody about it though. And I think it's a really, really important question. The Questbridge students, that's a really great question, and thank you. The FYSEP is for students whose family contribution is under 10,000. Questbridge students who are first gen though are still certainly eligible for the other programming that we do. Our programming throughout the year, including the picnic that we had this afternoon, is actually open to all first gen students. And FGLI is a more broad category. Anybody who is first gen and on financial aid, we welcome in as part of the FGLI community. FYSEP itself is for students who are from a lower income background than that, because frankly, if you can pay $70,000 to come to Dartmouth, but your family gets $10,000 in loans, that's a different experience than someone whose family is getting $75,000 in scholarships. So Questbridge students, we love, very vibrant community on campus, and we support them. But if your income is above 10,000, you aren't eligible for the FYSEP program. Well, I think we're over time. I am happy. Oh, thank you so much. And we are really just delighted that you were accepted. Bravo. If you have other questions, feel free. My email is there. These students are all easy to find as well. Your generation is very capable of finding each other. So thank you all so much. Our panelists, you guys are wonderful, and it's selfishly, it's great to see you all on the same screen. And thank you to our admissions colleagues as well, who apparently aren't visible there, but thank you so much, Katie and Jenny. All right, I think unless admissions folks want to say anything at the end.
Thanks so much, Jay. Just letting everybody know that we're going to try to get this recorded and put up on the website. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, I put some email addresses in the chat. You can reach out to the Office of Admissions or Jay at any time. And please let us know if you have any questions. We'd love to answer them. And thank you all, and have a really great night.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care.